The sun filtered through the blinds of our quiet suburban home, casting gentle slats of light across the floor. My daughter, Lila, was curled up on the couch in her favorite blanket, a soft fleece with pastel butterflies, a gift from her late grandmother. She was born with spina bifida and had endured more surgeries than any child should. Despite it all, she had a vibrant spirit that could lift a room. That day, though, something was off. It started when I noticed a strange woman standing outside our gate, arms folded, face set in a deep frown. She wore an HOA badge like it was a sheriff's star and had a clipboard clutched in her hand as if it were a sword. I stepped outside to greet her, offering a polite but firm smile. "Good morning," I said. She didn't respond in kind. Instead, she pointed toward the wheelchair ramp that I had installed 2 weeks ago at the front of the house. "This violates Article 7, Section B of the Neighborhood Exterior Modifications Code," she declared, as though she were reading a citation in court. "You didn't get HOA approval for that ramp." I blinked, thrown off by her tone. "My daughter is disabled. She needs that ramp. I didn't think I needed permission to install something for her safety." "Well, that's not how this community works," she snapped. "You can't just go around building things willy-nilly. This is a neighborhood, not a free-for-all." I looked back at Lila, who was now watching us through the window. She was used to stares, but even she could sense this woman's hostility. I turned back and said, "I'm happy to go through the formalities now, but I'm not removing the ramp." The woman's lips curled. "You'll be hearing from the board." Over the next few days, harassment followed. It started subtly, notes left in our mailbox citing violations. Then it escalated. Our trash can was mysteriously knocked over 3 mornings in a row. One evening, someone poured bleach on the garden my daughter loved to tend to from her wheelchair. I knew it was the HOA woman. Her name was Karen, appropriately, and she had made it her mission to enforce every petty rule in the handbook like it was gospel. One morning, I came home from the grocery store to find workers digging up our front yard. My stomach dropped. I ran toward them, shouting, asking what they were doing. One of them looked at a form and said, "Soil erosion inspection." HOA orders. I demanded they stop and stormed down to the HOA office. The receptionist gave me the same stiff smile Karen always did and said the president wasn't available. I demanded to see Karen, but she had conveniently stepped out. I left a letter, carefully worded, legally sound. I had experience in such things. That night, I found my daughter crying in her room. "Mom," she said between sobs, "I think someone was in the backyard." Her voice trembled. "They moved my flower pots. My gnome is gone." My rage boiled. Enough was enough. 2 days later, the unimaginable happened. The ramp was gone. Not removed. Gone. It had been ripped out, the bolts still lying on the steps, splinters of wood scattered like broken promises. There was a note taped to the door. "Final warning. Violations will not be tolerated. HOA board." That evening, Lila tried to wheel herself outside to retrieve a package but got stuck on the top step. Her chair tipped, and she tumbled. I heard the scream and ran out, heart in my throat. Her lip was split, her elbow scraped raw. I scooped her up in my arms, trembling with fury. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the city and the HOA. Still, Karen wasn't finished. The horror peaked 3 days later when I came home to find a small crew digging a trench in the backyard, directly next to the basement vent that Lila used to feel the breeze. When she read by the open window, I screamed for them to stop. They said the HOA approved drainage upgrades. When I demanded to see the paperwork, they handed me a form, signed by Karen, forged with a fake resident vote. That night, a storm rolled in. Lightning cracked. Rain fell in torrents. I went to check on Lila and found her bed empty. Panic seized me. I called for her. No answer. The power flickered. I ran from room to room. Then I heard it, a faint knocking sound from below. The basement. I bolted downstairs, flicking on my phone light as I went. The door was jammed. Water sloshed near the bottom steps. I yanked it open and waded through, heart hammering. I found Lila at the back corner, half submerged. The window she loved had been boarded over from the outside. Dirt was packed against it. I saw claw marks where she'd tried to push the boards loose. Her lips were blue. I wrapped her in my coat and screamed for help as I called 911. She survived. Barely. I held her hand in the my heart still breaking in silent aftershocks. And that night, I made a decision. Karen didn't know who I was. She didn't know that I had spent 25 years as a civil rights attorney. She didn't know that I had been nominated and confirmed to the Supreme Court 2 years prior. I had intentionally lived a quiet, retired life in this suburban neighborhood, hoping to raise my daughter in peace. But that peace was shattered. And I would respond accordingly. The legal case I filed against the HOA and Karen personally was swift, brutal, and effective. My team brought in every piece of evidence, every code violation, every HOA breach. The city got involved. The state attorney general launched an inquiry. And when it was all said and done, Karen was removed from her position, fined into bankruptcy, and charged with multiple counts of reckless endangerment, civil rights violations, and fraud. But none of that could undo what my daughter went through. As I sat beside her, reading aloud from her favorite book, I glanced at the butterfly blanket again. Some people think power is about titles or politics. But true power is protecting the ones you love, and ensuring people like Karen never get to hurt another child again. After the dust settled from the legal storm, I thought the worst was behind us. The neighborhood seemed quieter, the relentless phone calls from the HOA board stopped, and Karen was no longer the enforcer of their petty tyranny. But what I hadn't fully realized was that Karen's influence ran deeper than just one disgruntled neighbor. She had allies in the shadows, people who resented my presence and the disruption I caused by exposing their corruption. The nightmare was far from over. It began subtly. Small things at first. Packages going missing from our porch, car tires mysteriously slashed, threatening notes slipped under our door. But the most chilling moment came one chilly evening when I returned home late from the hospital after an appointment with Lila's specialist. As I approached the front gate, I noticed fresh footprints in the damp soil, leading to the side yard where Lila's wheelchair was stored. The lock on the shed had been tampered with. Inside, her wheelchair was damaged, one wheel bent and the seat torn. Fear washed over me in a cold wave. Whoever was doing this wasn't just trying to enforce rules, they wanted to hurt us, to break our spirit. I doubled down on security, cameras installed, alarms set, locks changed multiple times. But the sense of vulnerability lingered. My daughter, brave as she was, asked if she could stay inside more, which only tore at my heart. I hated that her world was shrinking because of other people's cruelty. One afternoon, as I was preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I cautiously looked through the peephole. Standing there was a man I didn't recognize, in a sharply pressed suit, holding a thick envelope. His eyes scanned the porch like he was sizing up the house. I opened the door just enough to speak. "Can I help you?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Justice, I presume. I'm here on behalf of the HOA board to deliver some documents concerning ongoing neighborhood compliance issues." I raised an eyebrow. "The HOA hasn't contacted me directly since Karen was removed." "That's correct," he said smoothly. "But the board is committed to maintaining order and wants to ensure your property remains compliant." I took the envelope, sensing the underlying threat. Inside was a notice about supposed landscaping violations and a demand to remove a decorative statue in Lila's garden, one that Karen had never mentioned before. I closed the door firmly. It was clear this was an intimidation tactic, a message that the fight was not over. I reached out to my legal colleagues and prepared a response, but something in me knew this was more than legal maneuvering. It was a psychological game aimed at wearing us down. Days later, as Lila and I sat in the backyard, I saw a shadow flicker by the fence. It was late afternoon, the sun low and casting long shadows. I called out, but no one answered. Then I noticed a small camera fixed to the corner of the neighbor's roof, pointed directly at our yard. I felt a surge of violation. Our privacy was gone. I decided to confront the neighbors during a community meeting. It was a gathering meant to heal the neighborhood, to move past the ugliness Karen had wrought. When I stood to speak, I looked across the room at the familiar faces, some supportive, some wary, others openly hostile. "I understand that change is difficult," I began, my voice steady but firm. "But what happened to my daughter and to my family is not just about rules or ordinances. It's about human decency. It's about recognizing that we live among neighbors, not enemies." A few people nodded, but a couple of HOA board members exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. One older gentleman muttered something about respecting the community's traditions, which I interpreted as code for keeping out anyone who didn't fit their narrow mold. After the meeting, as I was gathering my things, a woman approached me quietly. "I'm sorry for what happened to your daughter," she said. "I wasn't part of Karen's crew, but many here are afraid to speak up. You've given us hope." Her words were balm to my bruised soul, a reminder that not everyone in that neighborhood had closed their hearts. The harassment, however, escalated again soon after. One night, I found Lila's bedroom window shattered. No one was inside, thankfully, but shards of glass lay everywhere, glittering cruelly like shattered safety. We called the police, but the investigation went nowhere. The officers were sympathetic but had no leads. I suspected that some neighbors, emboldened by Karen's fall, wanted revenge or simply wished to scare us away. In the following weeks, I found myself exhausted, not just physically but emotionally. I spent late nights reading Lila's medical records, researching disability rights, and preparing reports for city officials. I also took to documenting every incident meticulously: photos, videos, witness statements. I was determined to build an unassailable case against anyone who threatened my family. Meanwhile, Lila remained remarkably strong. Her laughter still echoed through the house, and she insisted on attending school every day despite the anxiety the situation caused. Her teachers were supportive, but I could see the toll the ongoing hostility was taking on her fragile confidence. One afternoon, as I was helping her with homework, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was cold and clipped. "You're meddling where you shouldn't. Stop digging, or you'll regret it." My blood ran cold. I knew this wasn't idle talk. That night, I made a decision to take a step further. I reached out to old contacts at the Department of Justice, people who specialized in civil rights enforcement. They assured me that such harassment, especially against a disabled child and a Supreme Court justice, would be taken seriously. A formal federal investigation was launched. The news spread through the neighborhood quickly. Suddenly, some of the harsher voices quieted. Others doubled down, convinced that I was trying to use my status to bulldoze their community. But I was not fighting for myself. I was fighting for Lila, for every child who deserved to live without fear, for every family bullied into silence. With federal agents involved, the atmosphere changed. Surveillance cameras were installed around our property by law enforcement. Patrols increased, and slowly, the attacks lessened. Yet the emotional scars remained. Lila would sometimes wake in the middle of the night, haunted by nightmares of being trapped again. I comforted her as best I could, reading stories, holding her hand, promising that we were safe now. One evening, as I sat beside her reading a favorite fairy tale, she looked up at me and said, "Mom, will it ever be over?" Tears welled in my eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, we'll make sure it is. You're stronger than anyone I know." And she was. Together, we started advocating beyond our neighborhood. I spoke at forums on disability rights and housing protections. Lila, in her gentle, determined way, became a symbol for resilience. We connected with others who had faced similar battles, families pushed to the margins by rigid, unfeeling systems. Though Karen's shadow had loomed large, her fall had sparked something powerful, a movement to change the way communities treated their most vulnerable members. The journey wasn't easy. There were days when the anger felt overwhelming, when I wondered if peace was possible. But every time I looked at Lila's smiling face, every time she pushed herself a little further in her wheelchair, I knew we were winning. Because true justice isn't just about courtrooms or verdicts. It's about standing up when no one else will, about protecting the innocent, about changing hearts and laws to create a world where everyone belongs. And that was a fight I would never stop fighting.